Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Thursday, July the 31st, finishing off the month of July, heading into August on Friday. And yep, August is one of the busiest months when it comes to hurricane season, so now is the time to be prepared. It is another hot one here locally, although with the rain that we had late yesterday afternoon and evening, that actually did bring the temperatures down a few degrees earlier in the day. So, temperatures really aren't as bad, even though we still have a heat advisory that's going to be in effect for the rest of the afternoon. It's 87 under partly cloudy skies. That dew point's at 73, and our feels like temperature hovering at 95 degrees. Humidity running at 63%. And those skies are partly cloudy right now. So we're looking all right here in Acadiana. I did want to remind you, though, that there is a heat advisory. That'll be in effect until later this evening, although I do expect some more showers and thunderstorms to fire up. So will we make it with those heat index values over 107 or 108? Maybe some areas could see that, but we've had a little bit more cloud cover and even the showers kind of lingering there over portions of southwestern Louisiana. Most of that moving off toward the southwest, but you can still see some building of these showers and thunderstorms here locally, just kind of spotty there over parts of Acadia and Jeff Davis, and then getting down into Vermilion and Cameron parishes. Then we've had more, I would say, significant rains over western portions of Louisiana, kind of sliding south of Toledo Bend. And then if we work our way over here toward the Hammond radar, at this point, most of the action is in the offshore waters. So we'll watch the radar, but right now it doesn't look like there's a lot going on as far as the rainfall, but things will eventually pick up as we head into the afternoon. Check it out. There's a look at our traffic cams locally. Everything looking good. Sun and clouds mixed in Breaux Bridge and Henderson. Some sunshine there on the north side of Louisiana Avenue, and then farther inland, you've got mix of sun and clouds there in Opelousas and a little more sunshine as you get up toward Alexandria. And if you're going to do some boating or if you got some plans out on the beaches, we're going to be looking at things pretty quiet. Winds generally out of the west at about 5 to 10 knots, and seas only running about 1 to 2 feet. But we do have this trough that's still working its way off toward the west. So this is really what's going to be bringing us our chances for rain. That's going to continue to kind of very slowly edge its way up here into portions of Texas, and then it's going to get caught up in a frontal boundary that's going to be pulled southward into the region. There is some cooler and drier air up across the upper Midwest. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like a lot of that's going to make its way into Acadiana, but with the front in place and the extra cloud cover, that'll bring us better chances for scattered showers and thunderstorms over the weekend, which should keep our temperatures in check. So I do expect at least normal values as we go through the weekend. What a fantastic day it is over at Panama City Beach. Every time I bring this camera up, I'm thinking that water is just gorgeous out there. So beautiful day off to our east. A little bit more cloud cover, though. As you start working your way off toward the west, there'll probably be some scattered storms in and around Orange Beach and a little bit of cloud cover there at the areas there over around Dauphin Island, and looking a little bit farther to the west over toward Lumcon. Down in Terrebonne Lafourche area, we're seeing sunshine, at least there along the Louisiana coast, and then you go a little farther to the west over into Texas, a little more overcast as what's left of those showers and thunderstorms over southwestern Louisiana kind of push their way off toward the west. And you can see that the upper Texas coast kind of socked in with the cloud cover, while things farther to the east looking beautiful there along the Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida Gulf Coast. So that trough that's along the northwestern Gulf is going to go ahead and push inland, and the leftover energy and moisture is going to kind of stick around in this area here over parts of the southeast, and with the front coming in and stalling over much of Louisiana, south central portions of Louisiana this weekend. The combination of the both of those will probably bring elevated rain chances. But as far as any tropical weather, there's not a lot going on out there right now. But I will say that the computer models seem to be a little bit more robust for the areas out here in the Atlantic Ocean, pushing out to around Bermuda. We've got a series of fronts that are going to work their way here along the East Coast, with low pressure areas developing and then sliding off toward the east-northeast out into the Atlantic Ocean. At this point, it doesn't really determine whether or not these are going to be tropical type of systems. But as far as any tropical weather close to the U.S., I think the East Coast is going to be the prime area. Fortunately, though, anything that develops offshore there would likely roll away from the East Coast. Gorgeous day over Central America, mix of sun and clouds over Nicaragua and Honduras, then pushing up into the Yucatan and Belize. We do have some showers there over Costa Rica and down into Panama, but compared to the rains that we've seen over the past several days, things have eased up. But up toward the Yucatan, I'm hearing that there have been a little bit more of a lack of rain there, so they're actually in need of some rain there across parts of the Yucatan. Very, very quiet here over the Caribbean. Couple of tropical waves working westward, producing some showers there over Jamaica, and a little shower activity over parts of the Virgin Islands, and another tropical wave that's going to work its way toward the Leeward and Windward Islands here over the next couple of days. Should produce some rain. And then farther out in the Atlantic, we're still watching this little area here that might become a tropical depression if it gets its act together. But at this point, that's the only thing we're really looking at. We got a couple of more tropical waves that are working their way off the African coast that might have some chances for development farther down the road. Models have kind of backed off a little bit more on areas of the central part of the Atlantic, but it seems like more lows are going to try to develop off the east coast and then try to move off toward the northeast. But right now, the National Hurricane Center is not expecting any tropical development here over the next 7 days. So let's go through the models real quick. This is going to be kind of a shorter discussion because there isn't a whole lot out there, but I kind of want you to focus a little bit more rather on the middle part of the Atlantic basin, kind of focus on this area here out in the Atlantic where we get these lows that develop along these fronts and then they start to pull out into the Atlantic. Now, at this point, it's not really showing whether or not these are going to be tropical systems, but I think out toward Bermuda, that's one of the areas that kind of needs to be on guard, as several of these fronts are going to be pushing off the east coast and could produce several low pressure areas. And then when you look out here in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean, you get a couple of blips here and there. Yesterday, we were watching a wave that was going to try to maybe work into the western part of the Caribbean. And then as we got into the latter part of the weekend, it was right here. And then as we head into the early part of next week, it looks like it's going to be there and then would eventually curve away. At this point, the GFS really isn't showing any forecast development there over the Atlantic nor the northern part of the Caribbean. Now, over the weekend, the Euro model was getting a little bit more robust about that tropical wave about halfway across the Atlantic. And today, still showing the moisture staying together near the Bahamas as we get into the early part of next week. And then as those fronts start to slide off the coast of the U.S., it should tend to pick that up. So as it starts over again, you get that little bit of a wave there, and then it starts to move its way here toward the northern Virgin Islands. And then by the time we get into about Monday, it's right about there. And then by Tuesday of next week, you start to see the front here, and then everything would start to curve away. So at this point, the Euro not only is not really forecasting much in the way of low pressures developing over the Atlantic or even really off the East Coast, but fortunately the Euro is not predicting anything coming into the Gulf waters. Canadian runs very quiet as well. You got a number of lows there coming off the East Coast and sliding across the Atlantic basin, while the tropical areas there between Africa and over toward the Leeward and Windward Islands really not showing anything. So the Canadian model is staying very, very quiet going here into the first couple of weeks of August. And finally, we'll look at the Icon model, which again is showing more lows kind of pulling off the East Coast and pulling out into the Atlantic Ocean along an old frontal boundary. But then down from Africa, maybe over toward the Windward Islands, maybe a little low there, but that's way down the road. We're talking about midweek next week, and maybe some of that will get caught up by that ridge of high pressure that's off the European coast and maybe suck that northward across the middle part of the Atlantic, not allowing it to go any further to the west over toward the Caribbean or into the Gulf waters. So at this point, the Eurotropical Formation forecast still shows maybe a little development over the Atlantic, but perhaps a little bit of development too there along the East Coast. And then as we go into the following week, things quiet down. Very much what we're seeing in the models over parts of the mid part of the Atlantic, but you see it gets a little more elevated there off the East Coast. So maybe we'll get some tropical weather to form off the East Coast and slide its way back out into the Atlantic basin. But as you look at this map here of the tropical formation forecast possibilities, again, this is forecasting anything, whether it's a tropical depression or a tropical storm passing within, I think, about maybe 200 miles of any given location here. And this is from August 4th to the 11th. So this is Monday through the following Monday, next Monday. And during the month of August, that's pretty much where everything starts to develop. So if we go back and forth between what is expected in that first week or so in August, it lines up almost perfectly where we would expect most tropical development to happen during the month of August. In fact, this is a map representing all of the named storms that move through a certain area. So northern Virgin Islands, northern Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands back over toward Puerto Rico, and then from the Bahamas curving to the Carolina coastline and then out into the Atlantic is pretty much the hot spot during the month of August. So not surprising to see that the formation forecasts are showing activity pretty much where you would normally see it during the month of August. Taking the water temperatures a little bit farther out too, and anything that's shaded in yellow here that's over 26 degrees Celsius would be 80 on the Fahrenheit scale. So you can see from the coast of Africa all the way across the Atlantic, and then things really warm up over the western Atlantic, the western Caribbean, and much of the Gulf waters, and those temperatures are pretty much on target or perhaps a little bit above normal in some areas. We're starting to see a lot less in the way of below normal temperatures of our water out along the African coast and about halfway across, but the majority of the Atlantic basin is showing waters that are just a little bit warmer than average for this time of the year. Tropical cyclone heat potential is not just high over the southern Gulf and the Caribbean and the western part of the Atlantic, but we're starting to see some higher values there closer to Puerto Rico and then over toward the Windward Islands. And then farther out where you get some of these tropical waves to work their way across the Atlantic Ocean, now we'll have to kind of worry a little bit more about something getting in these particular areas, because you can see you got some high heat content there, which might even prime something to get even stronger before it reaches where the max values are of our tropical cyclone heat potential. Fortunately, we're not tracking anything in these areas now, nor is there anything really showing up in the extended models that would go in this direction. But as we go through the hurricane season, if we see something going in these particular areas, it's going to be of a lot more concern than something that might be a little bit farther to the north, or maybe even down here might not have as much chance for strong development. But a lot of times you get tropical systems that come in there and then the next stop is pretty much the Gulf waters. So when we see that high cyclone heat potential or that heat content there, it doesn't just measure the temperature of 80 degrees at the surface of the ocean, but it also goes how deep that 80-degree water goes. And in some of these areas here over the western part of the Caribbean, we're seeing that 80-degree therm go as far as 150 to 200 meters below the surface. So if a tropical system works in there, it's just going to churn up a bunch of hot water, and it can feed off of that, and sometimes you get rapid intensification. Things that do go against any tropical weather development is wind shear, and for the most part, off the coast of Africa and about halfway across the Atlantic, the wind shear right now is pretty much maxed out. So even though we've got some of these bigger tropical waves that are kind of coming off the Atlantic or coming off the African coast here, it's going to run into a lot of wind shear. But then as you get a little bit farther out here in the Caribbean and the Gulf and the western part of the Atlantic, at this point, the wind shear is pretty low. So if something wants to try to develop, it might have a better chance there over the western part of the Atlantic or perhaps into the Caribbean Sea. Going a little bit farther down as we look at the Saharan dust, again, this is something that's going to really start to fade over the next several weeks. The longer we have the Saharan dust, the better it is for us, because we don't see a lot of tropical development when you have these plumes of Saharan dust continuing to fly off the African continent. But You usually see this kind of lightening up by the time we get into the latter part of August and especially into September. So it doesn't really inhibit the development of tropical systems when you got less of that dust, because the air is a little bit lighter. You can get a little bit more moisture in the air. This dust is really some heavy, dry air for the most part. So tropical systems really have a hard time when they're trying to work through some of that Saharan dust. So for the next week, we don't have anything going on. The Euro showing maybe a little bit of development starting at the early part of next week. But then as we go through time, going into the second and third week in August, we do have the potential that we could see some action over parts of the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. And with that, that's kind of close to normal when it comes to the hurricane season. And the question that I've got down there is, when will the first hurricane of the year form? The thing is with that is we don't exactly know when the first hurricane is going to form, but I can tell you that the frequency of the tropical systems really starts to skyrocket. And if you want some more details, normally our first hurricane of the season would develop sometime about August 11th, somewhere in that range. So far, we've had 3 named storms, but all three of those have been tropical storms. And so now with just 3 under our belt, August 3rd is Sunday. So we're about ready to get back into the normal range. We were a little bit ahead of schedule, but usually the first hurricane comes around August the 11th. And we usually have 2 hurricanes during the month of August, and on average about 3 during the month of September. So hopefully that answers the question down there as far as what we're going to be seeing about the new hurricanes coming in, or any hurricanes. But at this point, I don't see anything coming in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully that will hold. So hopefully I've answered that question there about the first hurricane season, or first hurricane of the hurricane season. So I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do like this video, subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications. And don't forget, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. By the way, those are all Acadiana-owned radio stations. It's all local right here at home. And please follow my social media pages, both on Facebook and X. And of course, thanks to everyone who subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I'll see you on Friday morning for Acadiana Weather Today at 7 o'clock. Have a great day.